So, ADHD. I'm not the first one to talk about it, and I won't be the last. Thankfully, nowadays, there are so many online resources, especially on YouTube. There's so many YouTube channels that talk about the subject. But today, I, Zane, want to discuss my own experience with having ADHD. It all started when I was a wee lad, knee-high to a grasshopper. Just kidding. I was a small kid. In preschool, as far as I remember, nothing was amiss. I was a pretty normal tot. But once I got to kindergarten, I started getting a lot of praise and attention for being ahead of the class. It turns out that I had a very high reading level all throughout my time in grades K through 8th. I got older, scored well in the state assessment testing, I was on honor roll, and generally did well in school. My classmates, they looked up to me, and I was hailed as one of the smart kids. Of course, I had my own weaknesses. I was, and still am, very disorganized. You don't want to see my room. I would often space out in class and miss vital information. I mentioned that I had a high reading score. I loved reading so much back then that I would read whatever current novel I had instead of doing my work in class or instead of listening to the teacher. I was very forgetful, and often my grades took the hit due to me forgetting where I put my last assignment, or I would straight up forget to turn in the assignment that I already did. Not fun. So despite my intellectual prowess, I was absolutely nerfed by this mysterious inability to get my mess together, remember important details, and generally pay attention. I started feeling like I was stupid, despite all the praise that I got. And perhaps it comes as no surprise that math was my worst subject. There's a lot of details you got to pay attention to, and it still is my worst subject to this day. Anywho, all this time, I'm growing, getting older, and I figure that something must be wrong with me. At this point, I'm in high school. I'm still struggling with my scatterbrained self, but still making it through well enough to pass classes and still be perceived as a smart kid. More time passes. I graduate high school. Yippee! One day, I'm spending some time with a mentor from my church, and funnily enough, he actually works as a clinical psychologist. At this point, he's known me for a couple years, and we've spent some good time together. I remember that we were out for lunch, and I was trying to tell this story. I kept getting caught up in the details, going back and forth between the timeline, and taking way too long to get to the point. I eventually finished my tale, and he tells me, he straight up looks me in the eye, and he says, "Zane, I think you have ADHD." Boom! I was floored, flabbergasted. I didn't know what to say. I thought to myself, I thought ADHD was for dumb people. No, I can't believe it. I've known people with ADHD all my life, all throughout school, even outside of school. The kids I knew growing up were often disruptive, they couldn't stay in their seat, and they had other behavioral issues. And I was hardly ever a problem child. I had this really warped and incorrect paradigm of what ADHD was, or what it could be. It took me a couple weeks to start unwrapping this diagnosis, start really coming to terms with it. But after all this time, I'm very glad that my friend and mentor told me his thoughts that day, because it cleared the air and helped me understand myself more in the long run. I took my time and did some research. I found out that there are two main types of ADHD, the hyperactive type and the inattentive type. The reason why I didn't believe that I had ADHD is because almost all my symptoms related to the inattentive type, unlike my classmates who had more of the hyperactive type symptoms. I started going to the doctor, and I was thinking about taking some medication for my ADD. After some consideration, I decided that I didn't want to take any meds for my disorder, as I'd heard a lot about the side effects related to ADHD medications and how some of my close friends reacted to them. So, I started looking for interventions I could do on my own as an adult. One piece of advice that my mother would give me ever since I was a teenager was that if I couldn't remember something, I needed to write it down. I started keeping a journal to store important dates, information, and upcoming events. That worked for the most part. I started watching content on YouTube about other people's experiences with ADHD and finding tips and strategies to manage my disorder. One channel that I still watch after all these years is How to ADHD. Go on and check out her videos. They're very well put together. Another resource that I found only a couple years ago is an amazing book called You Mean I'm Not Lazy, Stupid, or Crazy by Kate Kelly and Peggy Ramundo. The title definitely resonated with me, and I found it at a local used bookstore. And when I saw it, I knew I had to buy it. I would love to read a chunk of the foreword that really summarizes my thoughts. I'm picking up the book right now. It is now clear that at least 50% of children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder continue to have the disorder as adolescents. Recent studies confirm that at least 30% of these children continue to have ADHD as adults. The behaviors persist and cause as much difficulty as they did when the person was a child or adolescent. Some adults first learn of their ADHD when their child is diagnosed. Suddenly, they say, "That's me. I have the same problems." Other adults first learn their problem when they read an article in a magazine or see a special on television. And unfortunately, too many adults never learn of their disability. Adults with ADHD continue to be hyperactive, distractible, and or impulsive. They can have difficulty with organization. In addition, many develop secondary emotional, social, or family problems. Often, there are career planning or job-related problems. And further, many of these adults also have learning disabilities, which, like the ADHD, might have gone undiagnosed and untreated. Thus, adults with ADHD need information about their disability and its impact on themselves, their families, their work, and their social lives. Well, isn't that great? The biggest part of growing with and through my ADHD is recognizing my own weaknesses. I tend to be easily distracted, so I give myself more time to complete tasks and do my best to get rid of distractions, to give myself a quiet space when I need to get work done. I can be forgetful, so I'm often writing important things down as notes, or I set alarms and reminders for myself on my phone. With every year, I get a better handle on my ADHD. And sure, not every day is perfect, but I keep moving forward, and I never stop improving. Thank you for your time.